All right, fabricators, I've been waiting for this moment for months. I've been working on all these tiny little videos showing you how we could move data from a Synapse dedicated pool, how we could parameterize a notebook, how we can do a dynamic pipeline in Microsoft Fabric. Well, today we're going to tie all that together. I'm going to do an end-to-end dynamic pipeline to show you how we can batch load data from our Synapse dedicated pool on Tales from the Field.
Today's gonna be a good day. Wake up. Today's gonna be a good day. Wake up. Today's gonna be a good day. Wake up. Today's gonna be a good.
If this is your first time finding your way over to Tales from the Field, give us a like and give us a subscribe. We drop content every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. On Monday, we have our MS Tech Bits. On Tuesday, we have our Azure Data Community Roundtable, where we feature content from the Azure Data Community for the Azure Data Community. Then on Wednesday, we have another MS Tech Bits. That's a video where we are inspired by you, the community, working with a customer or a product group, or just inspired in general. This is one of these great videos right now. Okay, normally I would just go straight to the content, but let's talk about this. So here's the premise of what we're doing. What we're going to do is I've got a dedicated pool. Now, my dedicated pool doesn't have a ton of data in it. I'm using this for demos, but chances are, if you're using a dedicated pool, you're not storing a little bit of data. You're storing a lot of bit of data, right? You're talking like terabytes, maybe even petabytes worth of data. So when we look at moving some of that data over, we're going to want to batch that. We're going to want to do a little bit of a time because we want to make sure not to put too much load on the system. But we also need to be smart about this, and we need to do it dynamically. So, well, what are we going to do? Now let's head over that great content. I'm going to show you exactly what we're going to do. So we're starting out in SSMS, and the first thing you're going to see is I'm connected to two systems. I'm connected to my Synapse Analytics workspace, to my dedicated pool endpoint, and we're going to be using our baseball database, and we're going to be taking our baseball stats table, and that's what we're going to move over. I'm also connected to my Fabric SQL endpoint to my baseball lakehouse, because that's where we want the destination for this to be. Now, in the last video, I showed you how we can use Spark to be able to connect. And this is just a quick reminder. I'm not going to go step by step through that. Check out that previous video. It's going to be down in the description of the comments. But remember, we're going to have a database scope credential. We've got an external data source that goes to a folder in my Azure Data Lake Gen 2 storage that is going to be used for the temporary processing mechanism. Now, the next thing I need to do is my baseball stats. I've got a lot of data in here. It's all the events of every game from pretty much 2021 until 2016. Now, I need to be able to get a list of what I migrated, and I want to migrate my data by year because I want this to be realistic. That's going to be a value that we do a lot of different distribution keys on that are searchable. Often that's going to be a where predicate value that we're utilizing to be able to pull back our data. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a CTAS. I'm going to create a CTAS table called DBO Migrated Years. And I'm just going to use this select statement where I'm going to take game year, and I'm inserting 0 as a bit flag for migrated from my baseball stats table, grouping by game year. And if I just run this select statement real quick, you can see it will return the different years that we have. You can also see that this is not ordered. But I've got a 0 for every single year. This is going to be our table that I'm going to dynamically end up batching through because that's what I want to be able to use. I don't want this to be a manual process. So that 0 migrated is going to be my bit flag. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run this. This will create my table, and it's a very small table for a dedicated pool, but it is sitting there, and now I've got my migrated years table. So now let's come down. And as a simple select, right, let's just select from the data. And I've got this ascending by year. So that way I can see, here's my 1921. Now I've got some gaps in the early decades. This is the free baseball data set from retrosheets.org. A lot of great stuff, but there's tens of thousands of events every single year that occurred for all the games that we had in baseball. So the next thing I want to see is this is a statement I'm going to be using over and over again. I'm going to be using this as I construct my pipeline. I'm going to dynamically get the top 2 years where migrated equals 0, which means I also need to upgrade this migrated flag after I bring those years over. So that way my system is taking care of itself. But as you can see, the first 2 years that will migrate are 1921, 1920, 22. Now we're going to be coming back to this. So we will look at this over and over again. And then finally, I've got a stored procedure. This is just a simple stored procedure. It's going to contain the business logic that you need, but this is going to increment my migrated years. Now, I want this to be set-based because I am on a dedicated pool. Set-based is always going to be better than doing some type of while loop to be able to update values. And so you can see what I'm doing is I'm taking my top 2 years. I'm adding 1 as migrated. I'm putting that into a temp table, my table 1, and I'm using it where the migrated is 0. So I'm always going to get my top 2 values where migrated equals 0. And then I'm doing an update, but I'm using a join specifically to set the migrated value to 1 where my game years match. So that way I should always be updating these two. This stored procedure, I'm also going to end up calling at the end of my pipeline. So that way the next time I run my pipeline, we should get new data every single time. Okay, let's head over to Fabric. So looking at this, I'm not going to rewrite all of this. This is the notebook that we used last time where I've got it parameterized. I have my username and password as parameters, but I also have this field. And very importantly, you can see I made this a parameter where we toggle it as a parameter cell. So that way values could be passed to it. Inside of this, the one big change I made was this line right here. My query select star from baseball stats where game year equals, and then you can see I've got a string. I'm converting that game ID because it's an integer value. I'm going to pass it through as an integer, and I'm converting it to a string so it can be my query string. And then you'll notice that I have added that down by the query constants for my query. Then I'm doing my .append right out. So this is the code. This is the notebook that we're going to be utilizing. So now let's head over to our pipeline. I've named this dynamic load synapse because that's exactly what it's going to do. And we're going to add a lookup task. We're going to name it exactly what it is. We're going to call it get years. That's what we're going to be doing with it. Nothing changed there. In settings, we're going to go to external. I've already created a connection to my Azure Synapse Analytics workspace to my dedicated pool. And I'm just going to use that dedicated pool. I'm going to set the connection type to Synapse Analytics. Remember to remove the first row. Critically important. This is going to fail. Now I need to add my query, my select top 2 query that we reviewed. Let's do a quick preview of the data. We can see, is this what we expected? Yep, 1921, 1922. Okay, so we're good to go. Now let's get our for each loop. We go to activities, and we're going to select our for each activity. We'll make an on success connection to it. We're going to rename the for each activity. Again, let's make it something simple. Loop. That's what we're doing. We're looping, right? And in the settings, this is where we get dynamic. We're going to get the get years output. Remember dot value. We need to add dot value. Once we add dot value, we click OK, and we're good to go. Now inside of our loop, we'll add our activity. Let's do a quick search, and let's find our notebook. And we're going to add our notebook task. And now we configure the notebook task. We just click on the notebook. We're going to name it, again, something very specific, load synapse data by year. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to go to settings. We're going to select the notebook that we created, Synapse, parameterized Synapse load notebook. We're going to look at our base parameters, and we're going to need to create one. I'm going to call this game_year. That's what we called our parameter in our notebook. We're going to put an integer data value type. And for here, I want this to be dynamic. We're going to do the loop dot get year, get_year, because that's the value that we're passing in from our query. It's the name of our column. We click OK. We're good to go at this point in time. We just need our stored procedure. So we do another on success after we get out of the loop, and we're going to say update migrated rows. So that way we know which rows are migrated. External, we're going to go back to our Synapse dedicated pool because that's where we're calling the stored procedure. We're going to pick our database next. Remember, it is our baseball database. And then our stored procedure name is our migrated years update. All right, this looks good. I think it's time for us to run it. So we're going to go to home. We're going to save. We click run. And this is going to run. I'm going to speed this up through magic for you so you don't have to wait for this entire time. Again, remember, larger tables are going to take longer. Mine's relatively small, only about 12.5 gigs. You can see we are updated. Now let's check the success over in SQL. Let's rerun our top 2. I can see the years are different now. It's no longer 19, 21, and 22. It's 25 and 27. Let's take a look at these columns, and I can see we have successfully migrated 2021 and 2022. But let's go over to our Lakehouse endpoint and take a look. Let's do a group by. We're going to get the game year and the number of events. These are the number of events per games. So let's go run this one more time, because remember, this is supposed to be dynamic and this is batched. So we could set this up to run on a process. Magically, we go through. We've already got this successfully. Now we can go back over to SQL and let's double check. 1925, 1927. And I see that we have the number of events associated with those in our Lakehouse. If I rerun our query, I see those 2 years are now migrated. And if I come back over and I look at the next top 2 years, I see the next year's 1930 and 31 have been selected. Now, this is important. What have we done? We've tied together all these lessons so that way we can figure out how we can dynamically load this data over. Keep in mind, you're going to want to make sure that you're loading based off probably a distribution key or an index that you're utilizing for your where predicate values. Normally, I would say, what did we cover? A lot, right? But we didn't. What we did today was we tied together a bunch of different concepts to show how we could do these batch loading operations, how we could make it dynamic, how we could use a lookup table, and how we could use that dedicated pool to be able to get that data over into Fabric as we're looking at migrating. You know what I want to do? I want to hear from you. So let's keep this going down in the comments. Sound off. Anything that you didn't understand, anything that wasn't clear, any questions you have. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us on Tales from the Field, and be good one another.
Set
Bye,
your
everybody.
affirmations, aspirations. I got shit to do, the aftermath of preparation. Good food.